On today's show, the Bucs prepare for their final preseason game. What's the latest with Jalen McMillan? What's the latest with Tristan Wirfs? And what needs to get cleaned up before Atlanta? Next on this edition of the Bucs Report, let's get it! Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Bucs Minutecast. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to follow or subscribe the Bucs Report on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Give it a 5-star rating, leave some comments, and tell your friends. I sure would appreciate it. The Bucs Report is a part of the Bucs Report podcast network. Check them out online, bucsreport.com. This episode is also simulcast on the Bucs Minutecast podcast feed, a part of the Fans First Sports Network. So let's get into it, talking about the Buccaneers as they prepare for their final preseason game against the Bills. And then it's off to where everything matters, against Atlanta in game one of the regular season. And already so much drama surrounding this team. But before we get going into it here, a note from our sponsor at Aspire Health Energy Drinks. Fuel your day in healthy ways with Aspire Health Energy. 80 milligrams of natural caffeine with green tea, 0 sugar, 0 calories, no crash. Amazing flavors like mango lemonade and raspberry acai. Check it out, 20% off at shop.aspiredrinks.com. Promo code Minutecast. So let's dive into it, talking about the Bucs here. A lot of news to get into. Teddy Bridgewater's strong performance, Jalen McMillan's scary injury, updates on Tristan Wirfs and Chris Godwin, plus what to expect in the preseason finale against the Bills. And what's the big glaring story I'll talk about right off the top here is the injury to Jalen McMillan. He's going to miss a substantial amount of time. Not optimal timing here, guys. We know that. We know that Chris Godwin is going to be out for a bit. So that does mean that the depth at the wide receiver position is going to get put to test. We know that Emeka Egbuka, we know that there is Evans and Sterling Shepard as number 3, plus you got Palmer in the mix. It is already going to be quite a challenge for the Buccaneers right out of the gate, but I think they're up for it. I think they are up for their 5th consecutive NFC South title. But let's get into it, talking about Teddy Bridgewater stepping up and, the quarterback battle. Who is quarterback number 2? Is it going to be Teddy Bridgewater? Is that going to be the case? Is it going to be Kyle Trask? A lot of questions. Plus, you have Bazelak in the mix, who is going to be in the mix in the preseason finale. Is what is said is that there is going to be no starters in this game. So expect to see Trask, Bridgewater, Bazelak, this kind of thing. But we know for certain is no Baker Mayfield. But Teddy Bridgewater, we know the veteran QB, looked pretty sharp against the Steelers, really sharp. He was decisive. The ball was out quick. He had rhythm with the receivers. And let's be honest, that's what the team needed to see. Hopefully it never comes to using your backup QB, right? If in fact Teddy Bridgewater is the guy. But if that is the case, it's good to have those assurednesses going into the season, because behind Baker Mayfield, the backup spot is still wide open. Kyle Trask is still in the mix. And it's interesting thing here to see that, there was that supposed quarterback battle when Baker Mayfield first came here. I never really thought it was the case, but that is where we're at right now. But Teddy, all things considered, he looked like the guy. Not only that, he got the offense moving, and quite an accomplishment for a guy that had, a significant amount of rust, in my estimation. You take a look at it. This guy was kind of in mothballs, the cryogenic deep freeze, if you will. And they thought him out. Jason Light reached out, and it was the right place at the right time for Teddy Bridgewater. We know that this team had been all in on Teddy before, but now the time was just right. And if called upon, he will make a good backup option. And the thing of it is, having Teddy in the fold, that's the kind of veteran presence you want in your quarterback room. Someone who can step in, stabilize things, and keep the offense afloat if Baker goes down. He is a bit prone to the injury bug, isn't he, at the end of the day? That he is a guy that will hustle. And I know that they don't like him running with the football as much as we have seen from him like last season. But that is just kind of intrinsically what kind of football player Baker Mayfield is he's a guy, if there's not an open receiver, then he's going to run for it if he thinks he can get first down. So now, do I think Teddy Bridgewater is pushing Baker for QB1? No, this is Baker's team. That was never the battle. But what the big thing is to bring in that veteran stability. In worst case scenario, emergency break glass, that the Buccaneers feel more confident pulling out Teddy Bridgewater than Kyle Trask, in my estimation, as Kyle Trask has not looked overly sharp, shall we say, in the preseason. But having Bridgewater as the backup, that makes me feel a whole lot better about the depth chart. And, like I said, at the end of the day, if he can serve as a good mentor for Kyle Trask, then I think that's a good thing. But what are some of the things that we know is that sometimes the starting quarterback will reach out to the backup and say, hey, what are you seeing here? Maybe what kind of plays are developing? How should I adjust? And having a guy like Teddy in the mix who has a lot of miles on his NFL odometer is invaluable, right? I don't think that's easily quantifiable, and a lot better position than to reach out to Kyle Trask. As we know, he doesn't have a lot of reps in the NFL. So an ideal situation, early take, I think, of course, that it is going to be Baker Mayfield 1 and Teddy Bridgewater 2. But hey, a lot's up in the air, right? I think that, and we don't know, are they going to have 3 quarterbacks? It seems like kind of a no-brainer that you would, but I've heard rumblings that they might have 2 in the mix, But, like I said, Basilik in the mix as well. It's interesting. So they want to get a look at these depth quarterbacks so they can go out and make the right decision. Because, when you go into the season, we know it's Baker. Worst case scenario, if he does in fact get injured, that you want to make sure and you have a good option behind door number 2. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the injury that it wasn't the thing that we wanted to see. Jalen McMillan leaves the game and will not be back for a substantial amount of time. What's the latest? I'll discuss straight ahead. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at SeatGeek. Are you heading to a Bucs game, Rays, Lightning, even a concert? SeatGeek makes it easy to find the best seats at best prices. And I got your hookup here on the Bucs Minutecast or the Bucs Report. Get $20 off your first ticket purchase over $50. Download the SeatGeek app or click the link below. SeatGeek, it is what makes the ticket buying experience so much easier. When you take $20 off, it makes it affordable. So go to SeatGeek.com, enter the promo code Minutecast. That's the promo code MINUTECAST, $20 off on your first ticket purchase over $50. All right, let's dive into it in the next segment here as we talk about the unfortunate injury to Jalen McMillan. Not optimal, right? I think that he really kind of came onto the scene and I think exceeded my expectations. just blowing up. And, I don't think that there was really high hopes for him going into last season, but, injuries are a commonplace on the Buccaneers. We've seen it, of course, with Godwin. We have seen, Mike Evans being more prone to being bit by the injury bug here as of late. So having Jalen in the fold is huge. And doing these shows, it's like talking to someone. Do you want the good news or the bad news? Well, let's go to the bad news. And that's Jalen McMillan out. And this one hurt. The second-year wideout goes up, makes an 18-yard catch over the middle, and boom, he gets undercut by Joey Porter Jr. Not optimal. Teddy Bridgewater was a bit of an airmail there. He did the damn thing right. He jumped up, caught the football, brought it down, but got undercut, spun, and landed awkwardly on his head and neck area. And when you saw it, you thought to yourself, well, that's not good. That's not good at all. And as it turns out, it wasn't good. He was wincing in pain. And the one thing I'm thankful for in all of this is that he is not injured as bad as we thought. Because there was a feeling out there that, that could be a neck injury, and those can be very bad. But what we saw the day after at practice was that he was there with the neck brace on. So it makes me feel like that it's bad, but maybe not as bad as we once thought. So let's talk about that. He stayed down. Trainers ran out. Eventually he walked off, but later they carted him back, and now severe neck sprain. Headed to injury reserve, could miss up to 8 weeks around the bye there. That's a huge blow. But the one thing that we know about the Buccaneers is they have a lot of depth at the wide receiver position. Again, Godwin, Evans, when they're healthy, the number one and number two, you can kind of vacillate back and forth on whoever that might be. Then, if he wasn't injured, I would say it was then I would say it's Egbuka, then McMillan, and you can kind of go down from there, Sterling Shepard, Palmer, that kind of thing. So it's a good thing that they have options like Sterling Shepard, and I have no concern going into the season with Shepard and Palmer in there. Would it be better to have McMillan in there? Of course. But as a number one, number two, you have Evans and Egbuka. That's pretty solid. Sprinkle in some Sterling Shepard and Palmer, and, things could be worse, right? I mean, you take a look at some other teams around the NFL that don't have nearly as great of options as the Buccaneers have at that position. So a blow, yes, but maybe not as bad as it would be for other teams, because let's be real here. McMillan was ascending. He finished last year red hot, 8 touchdowns in his last 5 games, and came into camp looking strong, looked like a breakout guy, that he wasn't just a flash in the pan, that this guy's trajectory was aimed straight up at the moon. But now he's sidelined. Even worse, Chris Godwin's not ready. But we knew that. And when Chris Godwin is engaged, there's not a lot of wide receivers that are better than him, in my humble opinion. You could argue around that, but I like Chris Godwin's game. I like Mike Evans' game. I think that they're in a good position, and we saw him at camp, and he was wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt in that Florida weather. And some people are like, why is he wearing those clothes? He must not be in really great shape. I guess I wasn't reading that too much into it, but apparently other people were. So hopefully that Godwin is good to go when the time is called for. So your depth at wide receiver, I think we're pretty good. Some people think it's shaky. You got Evans, you got Egbuka, and he looks the part, but McMillan was supposed to be that third reliable weapon. Now the options, now Bowles has to turn to Sterling Shepard, Tez Johnson, maybe Raheem Jarrett, even though that is an addendum that changed, as we heard there was some change ups there as well. But if I'm going to book it, just a little peek behind the curtain here, I kind of write this show throughout the week, that Sterling Shepard and Palmer, those kind of guys in the mix, but someone's got to step up. And honestly, don't be surprised if Jason Light looks to add another veteran receiver, maybe, because this offense can't be too thin in week 1. Again, I'm not fretting as much as some people are. I think that obviously that the Buccaneers would be in a better position had they had those people in the mix, but we kind of just have to adjust on the fly, as there has been some signings and some shakeups here, which I'll get to. I'm kind of, when I do this show, I do it in chronological order. from the last game all the way up to the most recent news before I hit the record button. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about defensive injuries and Tre Avery signing straight ahead. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at Righteous Felon Beef Jerky. And listen, I don't add all of the sponsors that want to be on the show. That's a little bit skeptical. Beef jerky, is that something to get excited about? Trust me, they sent me a trial package, and let me tell you, it's delicious. Are you looking for a high-protein, keto-friendly snack? Try Righteous Felon Beef Jerky Premium Black Angus beef, hormone and antibiotic free with flavors like OG hickory. Get 15% off your order when you use the promo code Minutecast. That's the promo code MINUTECAST at righteousfelon.com. Use the promo code Minutecast. Delicious. Don't reach for a donut. Don't reach for junk. Reach for some delicious Righteous Felon beef jerky today. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. Again, this podcast is also simulcast on the Bucs Minutecast podcast feed, part of the Fans First Sports Network. So talking about the Bucs as we edge closer and closer to the start of the regular season. One preseason game left against the Bills. And what are the things that we know? Not going to be any starters. That's what Bowles said. So it's going to be depth guys looking to solidify a spot either on the big team, on the practice squad, guys that were secondary, tertiary, bubble guys. This is their time to shine. So let's dive into that, talking about the team and some signings here. Let's talk about that. It's not just the receivers banged up. The secondary is hurting bad, okay? Christian Izien left the Steelers game with an oblique injury, and that's on top of Antoine Winfield Jr. dealing with a hamstring. Benjamin Morrison, hamstring. J.J. Roberts, knee, done for the year. Injury. So when you hear Jason Light, signing these players, and sometimes it just seems like an abundance of wealth at certain positions. In the previous segment, I talked about wide receiver, but talking about the secondary, banged up, and I think they were reaching for more options. That's 4 or 5 guys in the DB room, all injured. So what did the Bucs do? They signed Tre Avery, 4th-year corner, Rutgers kid, played with the Titans, bounced around this offseason. He's not a star, but he's depth, and we haven't even played the first game of the season, and we're reaching into the cupboard, and it's empty, so we're going to have to DoorDash it and bring in Tre Avery. He's experienced 30-plus games, a handful of starts, and right now you need bodies. The bigger issue, though, now is how much does this bleed into the regular season? Because this is where it gets tricky. If Winfield isn't 100% in week 1, that changes everything. And what do we like? We like Winfield. He's a dynamic player, all of those kind of things, but he is a bit prone to being injured. He plays larger than life, big minutes, and the perils of that oftentimes are being injured. Same with Izien. Bowles' defense is built on versatility, on depth, but when you're reaching down to your 3rd or 4th options, that's a problem. You're not going to see your best. So they're going to need to see the players step up. So yeah, that's finale against Buffalo. It's all about seeing which young DBs can step up and make the roster, because the Bucs might need them sooner than later. So interesting positions for the Buccaneers to be in. Again, we're kind of getting, making these acquisitions, reaching deep into the cupboard, those kind of things. Not optimal timing. All right, let's next talk about Tristan Wirfs and Chris Godwin's recovery updates. Let's switch to some better news, because it seems like this episode has been pretty peppered with injury news. Let's switch to some better news. Tristan Wirfs, the big guy, is back at practice, not full go, but moving, working, so that is encouraging. So let's talk about some better news here. Talking about Tristan Wirfs and Chris Godwin's injury. The big guy is back at practice, not full go, but moving, working, getting back into rhythm. That's huge because a healthy Wirfs, he's the anchor. That was the biggest blow so far as injuries are concerned. We know the role that Tristan Wirfs plays with this team and the great relationship that he has with Baker Mayfield. So it's not just plug and play. You can't just pick a guy up on the open market and expect him to replace Tristan Wirfs. So the very fact that these guys are relatively trending in the right direction has me feeling good. Because what role does he play with the Bucs? He is the one who protects Baker's blind side. And their relationship, like I said, is huge. I think that Baker plays more confidently when Wirfs is out there because he knows he's not going to get smacked as easily. He's the one who sets the tone in the run game, because that's the thing. Without him, the offense looks totally different. And Chris Godwin, another positive update as well. Still no timeline, still not practicing fully, but Bull said he is, quote, on track, unquote, trending in the right direction. And the thing of it is, and I spoke about this, if you listen or watch this show on a regular basis, you know that I applaud Jason Light and what he has done by addressing and kind of peeking into the future, that he's not exclusively caught up with how the Bucs are right now, because we know that Godwin's not going to be around forever. And, at the end of the day, I hate to even vocalize this and bring it to existence, but sometimes a bit of a liability. And what do I mean? When he's on the field, there is, virtually no one better than him, in my opinion. But just given the fact that he does get injured on a frequent basis, and, Mike Evans, hamstring issues, those kind of things, that it's a good thing that you have guys like McMillan, like Egbuka, like these kind of guys, because those are going to be your future wide receivers peppered in with whatever kind of players they draft between now and then. But in the here, right now, Chris Godwin trending in the right direction is good. Because with McMillan out, the Bucs need Godwin. Mike Evans can't do it alone. Like I said, you got Egbuka showing promise, but he's still a rookie. It's a good thing that they have Shepard and Palmer, these kind of guys. You need Godwin's hands, his third down reliability, his red zone presence. And just think back, just historically, how great he's been and how great the Buccaneers are with an Evans-Godwin tandem. So hopefully these next couple of weeks bring good news. Of course, keep it right here to the Bucs Report podcast, or bigger picture, bucsreport.com, your go-to source for Buccaneers news. So you guys can be in the know when it comes to the Bucs. Again, I do the Bucs Minicast a few times a week. I do the Bucs Report as kind of a longer form edition of that show. I bring you the news around the Buccaneers, and I hope to come to you guys in short order, telling you that things are better, that Wirfs is edging closer, and so is Godwin. And listen, Wirfs is a bit out, and Godwin is going to be a while as well. But the very fact that they're kind of in the mix and they're slowly making their way back, practicing that kind of thing, getting in on some of the action, that's huge. Because if Wirfs and Godwin can be back soon, that could be huge. Now, to close it out here, we're talking about the Bills, playing the Bills in the preseason finale and roster cuts. Let's bring it home. Friday night, Bucs, Bills, and don't expect to see the starters. Bull said that they're sitting. That's this one's all about the bubble guys, like I said. The last audition before cutdown day. So what am I watching personally? First, the secondary with all the injuries. Which young DBs step up? Second, wide receiver McMillan down and Godwin out. Someone has to flash. Third, the backup QB battle, Trask versus, whoever is going to be playing out there. It could be Bridgewater. It could be Bazelak. We don't know for that third spot behind Teddy. And fourth, the trenches, offensive line depth, defensive line depth. Some jobs are still up for grabs, and Bowles puts it perfectly. Somebody's always watching. If you're on the bubble, if you're secondary, tertiary, if you're a guy that's just fighting for your NFL life, you better bring it in this game. or he might be on the practice squad, or even a worst case scenario, looking for a job around the NFL. So yeah, this game matters. And to the people that say, I don't tune into preseason games, you should. Because these are the guys that are fighting for their NFL lives. And more specifically, they're fighting for their spot on your favorite team and mine, the Buccaneers. The thing of it is, and you can't live your life in the rearview mirror. I just talking about the Bucs here and watching the game against the Steelers, a game that held little significance, except for, like I said, the bubble guys, the guys that are looking for jobs. That Jalen McMillan getting injured, not optimal. And I think to myself, why was he in this game? Well, why? Because they have to field a team out there. It's just unfortunate that it had to happen. Now, listening to other podcasts, I listened to Stroud, I listened to Locked On Bucs, these guys, and the talk out there with James Yarko from Locked On Bucs is he was hoping that Baker Mayfield would get some reps. And Rick Stroud on his show changed his mind. He flip-flopped. He acknowledged he flip-flopped, that he thought that Baker Mayfield should get some playing time. His opinion was similar to mine, that, Baker Mayfield should not be out there. I'm still in the camp, and it doesn't really matter because he's not going to play. But I stand by the decision not to put Baker Mayfield in there, because could you imagine a more worst case scenario there right now than the Bucs go into game number 1 and Baker Mayfield is injured, and it's going to be Teddy, or it's going to be Trask, or it's going to be, that guy. That it's a good thing. And I applaud that decision. And, the feeling out there was that maybe Baker Mayfield being rusty could make the Buccaneers lose a game. Listen, I would rather the Buccaneers lose one game. I would rather the Buccaneers lose their first 2 games, if that's what it takes to get Baker Mayfield warmed up. I don't think that's going to be the case, but if that's your thought process, hear me out here. Then having Baker injured and missing a substantial amount of time. Imagine if he's out for the season. Imagine him being out until the bye week. The season could be over before it even started. And, listen to these shows, listen to Strouder's show. He was talking with Steve Versnick, and they were talking about Burrow, in Cincinnati and getting reps in, that kind of stuff. Good. I'm glad for the Bengals, right? You see that Lamar Jackson got dinged up. I haven't kept up on that one, how serious that injury is, but it is a thing that these players can get injured. And, you take a look at the wide receivers. I think the Buccaneers will be okay. It's not optimal to not have Godwin. It's not optimal to not have McMillan. Tristan Wirfs hurts. Antoine Winfield Jr., if out, is going to hurt. I get all of those things. However, those positions, running back, wide receiver, I guess, the defensive side of things is a bit different. But I think that big picture, 30,000-foot view, the Buccaneers can weather a storm in those positions a lot better than, say, Baker Mayfield's not in the mix. Because as bad as Wirfs being out, as bad as McMillan and all these other players, it pales in comparison than if the Bucs had to go into game 1 and it is Trask, or it is Teddy Bridgewater, or one of these kind of guys. That Bridgewater maybe will get you a game or 2, and Trask, big question mark. There was that mop-up duty against Atlanta. It's time for these players to rise up, prove their wealth, prove their worth, because it's going to get real here in a hurry as the Buccaneers play their final game against the Bills, and then it gets real against Atlanta. I hope that some of these players are ready to go, and I'll have you guys covered the entire way on the Bucs Report podcast. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, part of the Bucs Report podcast network, also on the Bucs Minicast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. All right. I'll talk to you guys again next time. Thanks for listening.